The security guard's laughter echoed across the county auction lot as Rachel Torres placed a single crumpled dollar bill on the registration table. She was bidding on a half-sunken casino boat that everyone else had written off as scrap metal. Her hands shook, not from the morning cold, but from the desperate gamble she was about to take, with literally the last dollar to her name. The Mississippi River stretched before them, muddy and indifferent, as the auctioneer pointed to Lot 47, the River Queen Casino, listing heavily in the shallow water near the abandoned dock.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
Rachel could see the skeptical faces of the other bidders, wealthy salvage operators and scrap metal dealers who had come looking for easy profits. None of them seemed interested in the waterlogged wreck that had been sitting there for 5 years. "Mom, why is everyone laughing?" 6-year-old Sophia whispered, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Her daughter's confused face made Rachel's chest ache. They'd been living in their car for 3 weeks since the eviction, and this auction was supposed to be their way out, not their public humiliation. "They don't understand what we see, baby," Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. She'd spent the last month researching this boat, the River Queen, once a floating palace of gambling and entertainment. It had sunk during a storm in 2018. The owner had died mysteriously, and the creditors had fought over it until finally giving up. The county had seized it for unpaid docking fees, and now it sat here, forgotten and mocked. The auctioneer, a man named Bill Hendricks with a weathered face and suspicious eyes, climbed onto the small platform. "All right, folks, let's get through these last lots quick. Lot 47, the River Queen Casino boat. Been sitting in that water for 5 years. Probably got more holes than Swiss cheese at this point." Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Rachel noticed a woman in an expensive pantsuit whisper something to her companion, both of them glancing at Rachel with barely concealed amusement. These were people who bought and sold properties like trading cards, who couldn't imagine the desperation that had brought Rachel here. "Now this boat's gonna need to be removed within 90 days, or the county'll fine you daily. Salvage rights only, structures probably unsound. We're starting the bidding at $500. Do I hear 500? Silence. Rachel's heart hammered. This was it. 400? 3? Come on, folks, there's gotta be some scrap value here. More silence. A man in coveralls spat tobacco juice and shook his head. Ain't worth the diesel to pump her out. All right, we need to move this. $100. Anybody? Rachel's hand shot up before she could second-guess herself. $1. The crowd erupted in laughter. Someone actually applauded sarcastically. Bill squinted at her over his glasses. "Ma'am, I said 100. "I heard you." Rachel's voice cut through the noise. "I'm offering $1. That's what I have. And that boat's been sitting here for 5 years with no other offers. $1 or you keep paying to maintain it." Bill's face went through several expressions. Surprise, irritation, then something like grudging respect. He glanced at the county official standing nearby, who shrugged. "Legal minimum bid's $1, if that's all we got." "This is ridiculous," the pantsuit woman muttered. "That boat's a death trap. Someone's going to get hurt." $1 going once? Bill called out, clearly hoping someone would save him from this absurdity. "Going twice. Anyone want to bid $2? The silence was absolute except for the river lapping against the dock. "Sold to the lady with the, very specific bid. Ma'am, you just bought yourself a sunken casino boat." Rachel walked to the payment table on trembling legs, while the crowd dispersed, most of them shaking their heads, or making jokes at her expense. She handed over her dollar bill, the clerk giving her a look that was equal parts pity and disbelief. You're going to need insurance, salvage permits, probably a structural engineer, the clerk said, sliding paperwork across the table. And you've got 90 days to get it out of the water or you'll owe penalties. I understand, Rachel signed where indicated, each signature feeling like a commitment she had no idea how to fulfill. But what choice did she have? Her ex-husband had left her with nothing but debt 2 years ago. Her parents were gone. Her teaching credential had lapsed when she couldn't afford the renewal fees. The shelter had a 6-month waiting list. This boat, impossible as it seemed, was the only shot she had. Sophia tugged her sleeve. Can we go see it now? Rachel looked at the River Queen sitting like a wounded animal in the murky water. Half of it was submerged, the paddle wheel broken and twisted. The upper deck sagged dangerously, and every window she could see was either broken or covered in grime. It looked exactly like what it was, a disaster. Yes, baby, let's go see our new home. The dock leading to the River Queen was in almost as bad shape as the boat itself. Rotted boards, missing planks, and a distinct feeling of instability with each step. Rachel carried Sophia most of the way, not trusting the structure to hold her daughter's weight. Up close, the boat was even worse than she'd imagined. The smell hit her first. River water, mold, rotting wood, and something else, something organic and unpleasant. The main entrance was partially submerged, water lapping at the threshold. She'd have to find another way in. A rusty ladder led up to what had been the promenade deck. Rachel tested it carefully before climbing, Sophia clinging to her back like a baby monkey. The metal creaked ominously but held. The promenade deck was a wasteland of broken furniture, shattered glass, and debris. The ornate railings that had once lined the deck were mostly gone, probably stolen by scavengers over the years. But the deck itself seemed solid enough, probably the only part of the boat that was. They found an entrance to the interior, a door hanging by one hinge. Rachel pushed it open carefully and stepped into what had been the main casino floor. It was like stepping into a forgotten world. Slot machines stood in silent rows, some toppled over, others still eerily upright. Gaming tables were covered in debris and water damage. The carpet squelched under her feet, saturated from years of river water seeping up through the floor. But overhead, she could see the ornate ceiling with its molded details and crystal chandeliers, now hanging at odd angles but still hinting at past glory. "It's like a castle," Sophia whispered, her voice echoing in the vast space. "It was beautiful once," Rachel agreed, running her hand along a carved wooden pillar that had somehow survived. The craftsmanship was evident even under layers of grime. This boat had been built with care and money, real money. They explored carefully, avoiding obvious weak spots in the floor. The boat was massive, 3 full decks above the waterline before it sank, and who knew what below. There was a restaurant, a theater, private gambling rooms, even what looked like luxury suites for high rollers. In one of those suites, Rachel found furniture that was damaged but not destroyed. A bed frame, a dresser, even a small couch. It smelled terrible and would need extensive cleaning, but it was something, more than they'd had in weeks. "We could sleep here tonight," she said, more to herself than Sophia. "Really?" Sophia's face lit up with an excitement that broke Rachel's heart. Her daughter was excited about sleeping on a rotting casino boat because it beat sleeping in a car. They spent the afternoon hauling their few possessions, from Rachel's battered Honda, bag of clothes, some toys for Sophia, a camping stove, a few basic supplies. Everything Rachel owned in the world fit into 4 trips. As the sun set over the river, painting the water in shades of orange and purple, Rachel stood on the promenade deck with Sophia. The boat rocked gently, almost soothingly, in the current.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
In the distance, she could see the lights of Riverside City coming on, the town where she'd lived her whole life, where everyone knew her story of divorce and failure. "What do we do now, Mommy?" Sophia asked. Rachel pulled her daughter close. "Now we figure out how to save our castle." The next morning, Rachel woke to sunlight streaming through a broken window and the sound of voices outside. She sat up quickly, disoriented, then remembered where they was. The casino boat. Their casino boat. Sophia still slept peacefully on the makeshift bed Rachel had fashioned from their clothes and a moldy mattress she'd covered with plastic bags. Rachel moved carefully to the window and looked out. 3 men stood on the dock, pointing at the boat. One of them had a camera with a long lens. Rachel's stomach dropped. She recognized the youngest one, Derek Morrison, her ex-husband's brother. What was he doing here? She made her way down to the deck, stepping out where they could see her. The men looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" Rachel called down. Derek's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Rachel, heard you made quite the purchase yesterday. Wanted to see it for myself." "It's private property. You're trespassing." "We're on the county dock," Derek shot back. "Public access, just taking some pictures for the family. Mom and Dad are very concerned about little Sophia living in these conditions." Rachel's blood turned to ice. Her ex-husband's parents, the Morrisons, had been fighting for custody of Sophia since the divorce. So far, Rachel had managed to keep her daughter, but barely. Now they had ammunition, proof that she was housing her child on a derelict boat. "Sophia's fine. We're fine." The man with the camera lowered it, revealing a professional smugness. "Ma'am, I'm Carl Winters, private investigator. I'm documenting living conditions for a potential custody hearing. You might want to get legal counsel." Rachel's hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. "Get off this property, all of you." "Like I said, public dock." Derek's smile widened. "But don't worry, we're getting all the pictures we need. Judge is going to love this. My niece living on a sinking boat with no power, no running water, no sanitation. That's child endangerment, Rachel." They left, Derek's laughter carrying across the water. Rachel stood there shaking, rage and fear warring inside her. They were right. She was barely providing better than homelessness. How long before Child Protective Services showed up? How long before a judge took Sophia away? She went back inside, checking on Sophia, who was still miraculously asleep. Then Rachel sat down on the moldy couch and let herself cry for the first time in weeks. Quiet, desperate tears that she couldn't let her daughter see. When the tears finally stopped, Rachel wiped her face and made a decision. She wasn't going to let the Morrisons win. She wasn't going to let Derek and his parents take Sophia. Somehow, some way, she was going to make this work. She spent the rest of the morning exploring the boat more thoroughly, notebook in hand, trying to assess what she was actually dealing with. The main casino floor was the most damaged, sitting at water level and completely saturated, but the upper decks were structurally sounder than she'd expected. The boat had been built with real craftsmanship, heavy timbers and quality steel. It would take work, a lot of work, but maybe it could be saved. In the engine room, accessible by a precarious stairway, Rachel found the boat's massive diesel engines. They were completely flooded, rusted beyond any hope of repair. But beside them she found something interesting, a metal door with a corroded lock. She'd noticed several of these doors throughout the boat, secured storage areas that had survived relatively intact. This one took 20 minutes and a crowbar she found in a utility closet to open. Inside was a small space, maybe 6 by 8 feet, its walls lined with metal shelving. Most of the shelves held nothing but mold and decay, but on the bottom shelf she found several fireproof document boxes. Rachel pulled them out carefully. They were heavy, sealed tight. She carried them up to the suite where Sophia was now awake and playing with her dolls. "What's that, Mama?" "I'm not sure, baby. Let's find out." The first box held records, financial documents from the casino's operation. Rachel skimmed through them, seeing nothing particularly interesting until she found a letter dated 2018, just before the boat sank. "To whom it may concern, I, Marcus Vega, owner of the River Queen Casino, am writing this in the event of my untimely death. What follows is a complete accounting of assets and holdings, including those the government doesn't know about." Rachel's hands started shaking again. She read faster. Marcus Vega had been more than just a casino owner. According to these documents, he'd been a collector, specifically of emeralds. Apparently, he'd spent 30 years acquiring some of the finest specimens in the world, keeping them hidden from tax authorities and creditors. The documents listed dozens of stones, their origins, their estimated values. The total value listed made Rachel's breath catch: $366 million. But where were they? The letter continued, explaining that Vega had hidden his collection somewhere on the boat, built into the structure itself during construction. He'd left a map, a guide to finding them, but Rachel saw no map in the box. She went through the other boxes quickly. More financial records, personal papers, photographs of Vega with celebrities and politicians. But no map, no emeralds. It was probably bullshit, Rachel told herself. A rich man's fantasy or a cruel joke. But what if it wasn't? What if there really were emeralds hidden somewhere on this boat? She thought about Derek and his camera, about judges and custody hearings, about sleeping in cars and eating at food banks. What did she have to lose by looking? "Sophia, baby, how would you like to go on a treasure hunt?" Her daughter's eyes lit up. "Like pirates?" "Exactly like pirates." They spent the next 3 days searching every inch of the River Queen that was accessible and safe. Rachel tapped walls, pried up loose floorboards, examined every architectural detail for signs of hidden compartments. She found plenty of hiding places, spaces between walls, hollow pillars, concealed cabinets, but all of them were empty. At night, she studied the documents more carefully by flashlight, trying to understand what Vega had been thinking. The man had been paranoid, that much was clear. He'd trusted no one, kept his assets hidden, and died alone when the boat sank during that storm. Authorities said he'd been trying to save something when he drowned. His body had been found in the lower decks, wedged in a doorway. What had he been trying to save? The emeralds? Or the map to them? On the fourth day, Rachel was exploring the lowest deck that wasn't completely flooded. It was dark down here, claustrophobic, the ceiling low and oppressive. She was about to give up and head back when her flashlight beam caught something odd. In the floor near the bow, beneath inches of standing water, she could see a pattern. Most of the floor was standard industrial decking, metal plates riveted together, but here a section was different. The rivets weren't standard, they were decorative, arranged in a specific pattern. Rachel waded into the cold water, ignoring the way it soaked through her already ruined shoes. She knelt down, running her fingers over the rivets. They weren't just decorative, they were a code. She recognized it after a moment, Morse code. Her heart racing, Rachel traced each rivet, translating slowly. Vault, floor, beneath ballast. She ran back upstairs, grabbed her notebook, and flipped through Vega's papers until she found the boat's original blueprints. Yes, there it was. The ballast chamber, the lowest point of the boat, designed to hold weight and keep the vessel stable. It should be completely flooded now, inaccessible. But what if it wasn't? What if Vega had designed something that could survive even flooding? The problem was getting there. The ballast chamber access was through a hatch that was now underwater. Rachel would need diving equipment, or she'd need to somehow pump out enough water to reach it. Both options required money she didn't have. She was staring at the blueprints, trying to figure out an impossible solution when she heard a voice calling from outside. "Hello? Anyone aboard?" Rachel went out to find a man standing on the dock. He was maybe 60, fit and weathered, wearing work clothes and carrying a toolbox. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I'm Gene Patterson. I used to work on this boat, chief engineer, back in the day. Heard someone finally bought her at auction. Wanted to see if you needed help." Rachel studied him carefully. "Why would you want to help?" Gene shrugged. "This boat meant something once. Hate to see her die like this. Plus, I heard you got her for $1, which means you probably can't afford to hire anyone. Thought I'd offer some free advice at least." It was probably a mistake to trust him, but Rachel was desperate. "Can you dive?" Gene's eyebrows rose. "I can. Why?" "Because I need to get into the ballast chamber." Gene looked at her for a long moment, then slowly smiled. "You found something, didn't you? In Vega's papers." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe, but I don't know if it's real." Vega was paranoid as hell, but he wasn't crazy. If he left a clue, there's probably something there. Gene set down his toolbox. "I'll make you a deal. I help you check it out, and if there's nothing, we forget about it. If there is something, I get 10%. 5%. Done." They shook hands, and Rachel felt the first flutter of real hope since this whole thing started. Gene arrived the next morning with diving equipment. He'd assessed the situation and determined that the ballast chamber access was flooded but probably reachable. The bigger question was whether the chamber itself had stayed sealed or if it was just another flooded compartment. Vega was smart, Gene said as he suited up. He designed redundant systems, watertight compartments within compartments. It's possible he built something that could survive the sinking. Rachel watched from above as Gene descended into the murky water. Sophia sat beside her, legs dangling over the edge, fascinated by the bubbles rising to the surface. 10 minutes passed. 15. Rachel's anxiety grew. What if something went wrong? What if Gene got stuck down there? Finally, his head broke the surface. He pulled off his mask, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Rachel couldn't stand the suspense. "The hatch is there, and it's sealed. Some kind of custom lock, combination, or key needed. I couldn't open it." Rachel's hope deflated. Of course, there was another barrier. "But," Gene continued, climbing onto the deck, "I could feel something through the metal. Vibration, resonance. That chamber isn't flooded, Rachel. There's an air pocket in there, which means whatever Vega put inside might have stayed dry." They went back to Vega's papers, searching for anything about combinations or keys. Finally, in a photo Rachel had glossed over before, she noticed something. Vega wearing a necklace, unusual for a man. She looked closer. It wasn't a necklace, it was a key, ornate and old-fashioned. "That's it," Gene said, looking over her shoulder. "But where is it now?" Rachel thought about where Vega's body had been found. In a doorway on the lower deck, trying to save something. She grabbed her flashlight. "I think I know." The doorway where Vega had died had been examined and cleared by authorities years ago, but they'd been looking for causes of death, not hidden keys. Rachel approached it carefully, studying every detail. The frame was ornate, carved wood that seemed out of place in this utilitarian area. She ran her fingers along the carvings, pressing, pulling, testing. Nothing. Then she noticed it. One of the carved flowers was slightly different from the others. She pressed it and felt it give with a click. A small compartment popped open in the door frame. Inside, tarnished but intact, was the key. Gene dove again the next day, this time with the key. Rachel waited in an agony of anticipation, watching the water, counting minutes. When Gene surfaced this time, he was grinning. "You need to see this." He'd brought up a waterproof case, military grade, about the size of a briefcase. Rachel's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a single emerald the size of her fist. Even in the dim light, it glowed with an internal fire that took her breath away. "There's more," Jean said. "Lot more. That chamber is packed with them, cases and cases. This was just the one I could carry safely." Rachel stared at the emerald, unable to process what she was seeing. It was real. All of it was real. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Jean sat down beside her, water dripping from his wetsuit. "Now you call a lawyer, a good one, because what you've got here is complicated. Vega died owing people money. Creditors might have claims. Then there's taxes, inheritance law, maritime salvage law. You need protection before word gets out. I don't know any lawyers. I can barely afford food." Jean pulled out his phone. "I know someone, Michael Chen, maritime law specialist. He's expensive, but he's honest. Tell him Jean sent you and tell him you need help now." Michael Chen arrived 2 days later, a sharp-dressed man in his 40s who managed to make the trek out to the boat look effortless. He listened to Rachel's story without interruption, examined the documents, and looked at the emerald. "This is significant," he said finally. "Very significant. But Jean's right, it's complicated. The good news is that you bought this boat legally, which gives you strong salvage rights. The bad news is that Vega's creditors will come out of the woodwork once they know about this. What do I do? First, we keep this quiet until we have all our legal ducks in a row. Second, we get these emeralds professionally appraised and documented. Third, we file the proper claims and get ahead of any challenges. Fourth, we prepare for a fight, because the Morrisons and anyone else who wants a piece of this will come hard." Michael noticed Rachel's expression at the mention of the Morrisons. "Who are they?" Rachel explained about the custody threat, about Derek and his camera. Michael's expression hardened. "They're not getting your daughter. We'll make sure of that." "This discovery changes everything, Rachel. You're not a homeless single mom anymore. You're a salvage operator who made a legitimate find. Big difference in how judges see things." Over the next week, Michael brought in a team. Professional divers to safely extract the emeralds, gemologists to catalog and appraise them, security to make sure nothing disappeared. The ballast chamber, as it turned out, contained 43 cases of emeralds, each one packed with stones of various sizes. The smallest was the size of a marble. The largest, which they found in a special case at the very back, was the size of a grapefruit. The gemologists called it museum quality, possibly one of the finest emeralds ever found. The total appraised value, $366 million. Vega had been exact in his accounting. Word spread fast despite their attempts at secrecy. Within days, reporters were calling, boats were cruising past, and strangers were showing up at the dock. Michael filed immediate legal claims establishing Rachel's rights, but as predicted, challenges came just as quickly. Vega's former business partners claimed they had rights to any assets. His ex-wife, who'd divorced him 10 years before his death, claimed part of the estate. The IRS opened an investigation, and of course the Morrisons filed an emergency custody motion, claiming the stress and attention made Sophia's environment unstable. The custody hearing came first. Rachel sat in a courtroom wearing a borrowed suit, facing a judge who'd seen too many sad cases. The Morrisons' lawyer painted Rachel as an unstable opportunist who was putting her daughter at risk. Then Michael stood up and systematically destroyed their case. He presented documentation of Rachel's legitimate purchase, her responsible handling of the discovery, her cooperation with authorities. He showed plans for Sophia's trust fund, already set up and funded. He brought in a child psychologist who'd evaluated Sophia and found her happy, well-adjusted, and thriving. Most damaging to the Morrisons was Derek's own testimony. Under Michael's cross-examination, Derek admitted he'd never offered to help Rachel when she was homeless. never sent money for Sophia, never even called to check on them. The judge's ruling was swift. The court finds no evidence of neglect or instability. Ms. Torres has demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness and judgment. Custody remains with the mother. Motion denied. The Morrisons stormed out. Derek shot Rachel a look of pure hatred, but Rachel barely noticed because Sophia was hugging her and they were still together. The legal battles over the emeralds took longer. Vega's creditors had legitimate claims for debts owed, which reduced Rachel's share. The ex-wife got a settlement based on community property law, even though she'd been divorced when Vega acquired most of the emeralds. The IRS took their substantial piece. When everything was settled 6 months after Rachel had placed that single-dollar bill on the auction table, she retained ownership of $140 million worth of emeralds. Life changed in ways both dramatic and subtle. Rachel bought a real house, a modest one by choice, where Sophia could have her own room and a backyard. She hired a financial advisor and invested most of the money conservatively. She set up a foundation to help single parents facing homelessness, but she kept the River Queen. With Jean's help and a team of restoration experts, she brought the boat back to life. Not as a casino this time, but as a floating community center, a place where people down on their luck could get help, take classes, find hope. The grand reopening was exactly 1 year after the auction. Rachel stood on the restored promenade deck, watching Sophia cut the ribbon with oversized scissors. Jean stood beside her, along with Michael and a crowd of people whose lives the foundation had already touched. "You know what I realized?" Rachel said to Jean as they watched the celebration. "What's that?" "Everyone thought I was crazy for buying this boat. They laughed at me, called it $1 worth of junk. But it was never about the boat's condition. It was about seeing what could be instead of what was." Jean smiled. Vega would have appreciated that. He always said most people can't see past the surface. That's why his emeralds stayed hidden so long. Rachel looked out over the river, the same water that had seemed so threatening a year ago. Now it just looked peaceful, reflecting the late afternoon sun. "The funny thing is," she continued, "the emeralds changed my life, but they didn't save it. We survived before we found them. We would have found a way somehow. The treasure just made everything easier." "And gave you the chance to help others," Jean pointed out. "Don't discount that. You could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, you're here, making a difference." Sophia ran up, breathless with excitement. "Mama, there's a lady here who wants to talk to you. She says she used to work here too, and she remembers when the boat was beautiful." Rachel let herself be pulled into the crowd, into conversations and connections, into a life she'd never imagined when she was sleeping in her car. The River Queen rocked gently in the current, restored and repurposed, no longer hiding its treasures but sharing them with everyone who needed help. That night, after the celebration ended and everyone had gone home, Rachel walked through the boat alone. She stopped in what had been the main casino floor, now converted into a large gathering space. The chandeliers had been restored and glowed softly overhead. The carpet was new, the walls freshly painted, but she'd kept one small section of the original floor, the part with the Morse code rivets, preserved behind glass, a reminder of what had been hidden beneath and what she'd been brave enough to seek. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Major news outlet wants to interview you about the discovery. Good publicity for the foundation. Interested?" Rachel thought about it, then replied, "Only if they want to talk about helping people, not just finding treasure." She pocketed the phone and made her way to the suite, where she and Sophia had spent those first desperate nights. It was now a comfortable apartment for the foundation's live-in coordinator, but Rachel had kept the key. She opened the door and stood in the space, remembering the fear, the determination, the moment she'd opened that document box and dared to hope. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, to Marcus Vega's ghost, to whatever force in the universe had led her to place that dollar bill on the table. The boat creaked softly in response, settling into the current, and Rachel smiled. She'd bought a sinking casino boat for $1 and found more than emeralds. She'd found proof that sometimes the thing everyone else thinks is worthless is exactly what you need. That believing in yourself when no one else does isn't foolishness, it's courage. That treasures come in many forms, and the most valuable ones are often the hardest to see. She locked the door and headed home to Sophia, leaving the River Queen to rock gently in the darkness, no longer a tomb for hidden wealth, but a beacon of hope for anyone who needed it. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the river was calm, security guards swore they could see a light in the old ballroom window, as if Marcus Vega himself was checking on his boat, pleased that his emeralds had finally found their purpose. 3 months after the River Queen's reopening, Rachel received a visitor who would change everything one more time. She was in her office on the boat, reviewing applications for the Foundation Scholarship Program, when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's a woman here to see you, says her name is Christina Vega. She claims to be Marcus Vega's daughter." Rachel's pen stopped mid-signature. In all the legal proceedings, no daughter had ever been mentioned. The ex-wife, yes, business partners, creditors, but never a child. "Show her in." The woman who entered was maybe 40, with Marcus Vega's distinctive dark eyes and sharp cheekbones. She carried herself with the careful composure of someone who'd learned to hide emotion. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, but something haunted in her expression. "Ms. Torres, thank you for seeing me." Her voice was cultured, controlled. "I know this must be surprising. My father and I were estranged for 15 years before he died. I didn't come forward during the legal proceedings because I didn't want his money. I still don't." Rachel gestured to a chair. "Then why are you here?" Christina sat, her hands folded precisely in her lap. "Because I heard what you're doing with this boat, the foundation, the community center. It's what he would have wanted, even though he never knew how to do it himself." She paused, gathering herself. "My father was brilliant and deeply flawed. He collected beautiful things but couldn't maintain beautiful relationships. Those emeralds you found, he started collecting them after my mother died. I think they were a substitute for everything he couldn't hold on to." Rachel waited, sensing there was more. "I came because I have something that belongs with this boat, something he left me before we stopped speaking." Christina reached into her bag and pulled out a leather journal, worn but well preserved. His private writings, the real story of those emeralds, where each one came from, what they meant to him. "I thought you should have it." Rachel accepted the journal carefully. "Why give this to me?" "Because you did something I never could. You saw past the surface to what this boat could be. My father spent his life hiding treasures. You're revealing them in a different way." Christina stood, preparing to leave. "There's one more thing, the largest emerald, the one the gemologists called museum quality." "Yes?" "That was my mother's. He bought it the year she was diagnosed with cancer, called it the Heart of Hope. Said as long as he had it, she'd survive." Christina's voice cracked slightly. "She died anyway, and he never forgave the world for it. If you decide to sell that one, I'd like to buy it. Not to keep it hidden, but to donate it to cancer research in her name. Something good from something that only brought him pain." After Christina left, Rachel sat with the journal for a long time before opening it. The first entry was dated 1985, just after Marcus's wife's diagnosis. "Bought the first emerald today. Colombian stone, flawless. The dealer said it was called the Hope Stone by the miners who found it. I told Elena it would be her talisman. She laughed and said I was being superstitious, but I saw something in her eyes. She wants to believe, so do I. Entry after entry chronicled his growing obsession. Each emerald had a story, a meaning, a desperate hope attached to it. Brazilian stones for her strength, Zambian stones for her courage, Russian stones for her determination. He'd been building a collection of wishes, as if enough green fire could hold back death. After Elena died, the entries changed. The emeralds stopped being about hope and became about protection, about hiding wealth from a world that took everything, about trusting no one because everyone left eventually. The final entry was dated 2 days before the storm that sank the River Queen. I've hidden everything where only someone worthy will find it, someone brave enough to look past the ruins, someone who needs hope more than they need wealth. Let the emeralds do for them what they couldn't do for me. Save something that matters. Rachel closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. Marcus Vega had known. Somehow he'd known that his boat would sink, that his treasures would be hidden, that someone desperate would eventually find them. He'd orchestrated it all, a final gift to a stranger he'd never meet. She picked up her phone and called Michael Chen. I want to sell the Heart of Hope Emerald, all proceeds to cancer research, in Elena Vega's name. And I want to establish a permanent memorial to Marcus on the boat, telling his real story. That stone alone is worth 40 million, Rachel. Are you sure? She looked around her office at the photos on the wall of families the foundation had helped. Single mothers who'd found housing, children who'd gotten scholarships, people who'd been given second chances. I'm sure some treasures are meant to be passed on. The sale of the Heart of Hope made international news. The emerald went to a private collector who immediately loaned it to the Smithsonian, where it would be displayed alongside a plaque telling Elena and Marcus Vega's story. $40 million went to cancer research centers across the country. But that publicity brought something Rachel hadn't anticipated. More scrutiny, more attention, and eventually, more trouble. An investigative journalist named Patricia Nolan contacted Rachel 3 weeks after the emerald sale. She wanted to do a feature story on the River Queen discovery. Rachel almost said no. She'd turned down dozens of similar requests. But something in Patricia's approach was different. I'm not interested in a feel-good treasure story, Patricia said when they met for coffee in Riverside City. I'm interested in how you did it. A single mother with $1 facing custody threats, living in her car. Now you're running a multi-million-dollar foundation. That's not luck, Ms. Torres. That's strategy, determination, and something else. I want to understand what. Rachel studied the reporter across the table. Patricia was maybe 50, with intelligent eyes and the weathered look of someone who'd chased hard stories in hard places. What's the real angle here? Patricia set down her coffee cup. Honestly, I was homeless once, 20 years ago after my divorce. Lived in my car with my son for 4 months before I landed a job at a small paper. Worked my way up, but I never forgot what it felt like. When I heard your story, I thought maybe I could tell it in a way that helps other people see what's possible. Something in Rachel relaxed. All right, but I want approval before anything publishes. And I want the focus on the foundation's work, not just the treasure. The resulting article, published 6 weeks later in a major magazine, was everything Rachel had hoped for. Patricia had done her research, interviewing Jean, Michael, the families the foundation had helped, even Christina Vega. She'd traced Rachel's entire journey from the auction to the present, but focused on the human cost and triumph rather than just the monetary value. The article went viral. Within days, Rachel was fielding calls from major networks, documentary producers, even Hollywood studios wanting to option the story. The foundation's website crashed from traffic, Donations poured in from across the country, but with visibility came vulnerability. A man named Leonard Grayson reached out through the foundation's contact form. He claimed to be Marcus Vega's former attorney, and he had concerns about the emerald discovery. Rachel agreed to meet him at the River Queen, with Michael Chen present. Grayson was 65, silver-haired and expensively suited, carrying an air of legal authority. He settled into Rachel's office and opened his briefcase without preamble. "Ms. Torres, I represented Marcus Vega for 20 years. I handled his estate planning, his business contracts, everything. When he died, I presumed his assets were lost with the boat. Now I learn there were emeralds worth hundreds of millions, and I'm concerned." Michael leaned forward. "Concerned about what? Ms. Torres's salvage rights are clear." "I'm not disputing the salvage rights. I'm concerned about the provenance of those emeralds." Grayson pulled out a file. 3 months before his death, Marcus contacted me about insurance. He wanted coverage for a gemstone collection, but he was cagey about details. I advised him he'd need documentation of legal acquisition, certificates of origin, export permits for international stones. He said he'd handle it and never mentioned it again. Rachel's stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that some of those emeralds may have been acquired illegally, smuggled, stolen, purchased on black markets. If that's true, they could be subject to seizure and repatriation, and anyone who sold them could face charges." Michael's expression hardened. "This is the first anyone's mentioned this. Where were you during the legal proceedings?" "I only recently learned the details. The media coverage of the Heart of Hope sale caught my attention." Grayson looked directly at Rachel. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Ms. Torres. I'm here to warn you. If the emerald's origins are questioned, you could lose everything. I'd like to offer my services to investigate and, if necessary, defend the provenance of the collection." After Grayson left, Rachel sat in stunned silence. Michael paced the office, clearly agitated. He might be legitimate or he might be fishing for a payday. Either way, we need to take this seriously. Michael stopped pacing. "Let me do some research. We still have Vega's documents. If we can prove legitimate acquisition for most of the emeralds, even if a few are problematic, you should be protected under good faith purchaser laws." The investigation took 3 months and was more complex than anyone anticipated. Michael brought in experts in international gem trafficking, art recovery specialists, and researchers who traced the emerald's origins through Vega's meticulous records. The results were mixed. About 70% of the collection had clear documentation of legal purchase. These were stones bought from legitimate dealers with proper export permits and certificates of origin. But 30% had questionable histories. Some had been purchased from dealers known to traffic in smuggled gems. Others had suspicious gaps in their provenance. Most troubling were 6 emeralds that matched descriptions of stones stolen from a Colombian museum in 1992. If authorities confirmed this, those stones would have to be returned. Rachel made a decision that surprised everyone, including Michael. "We proactively report everything. Every questionable stone, every suspicious purchase. We work with authorities to return anything that was stolen, and we establish a fund to compensate anyone who can prove ownership of gems that were illegally acquired." "Rachel, that could cost you tens of millions," Michael warned. "I don't care. Marcus Vega spent his life hiding things out of fear. I won't build something good on a foundation of stolen property. We do this right, even if it costs us." The process took another 6 months. Colombian authorities confirmed that 6 emeralds matched their stolen collection. Rachel returned them immediately, making headlines for her cooperation. 3 other stones were traced to a defunct mine in Zambia that had been operating illegally. Those were returned to the Zambian government for their national museum. Various other claims were settled through the compensation fund Rachel established. In total, it cost her $43 million in returned stones and settlements. But something unexpected happened. The story of Rachel's integrity went even more viral than the original treasure discovery. Major donors, inspired by her actions, contributed to the foundation. A billionaire philanthropist matched her $43 million loss, designating it for the foundation's work. International organizations focused on ethical sourcing and repatriation praised her publicly. Sophia, now 8 years old, told her mother one night, "Everyone at school says you're a hero, but you were already my hero before any of this." Rachel tucked her daughter into bed in their comfortable but modest home, looking at the girl who had been her motivation through everything. Heroes are just regular people who do the right thing even when it's hard, baby. Remember that. The River Queen Foundation expanded beyond anyone's initial vision. The boat remained its headquarters, but the organization now operated in 6 cities, providing housing assistance, job training, legal aid, and emergency support to thousands of single-parent families. Gene Patterson became the foundation's operations director, bringing his practical wisdom to every decision. He'd refused a salary for the first year, finally accepting one only when Rachel threatened to stop working with him. "Someone has to keep you from giving everything away," he'd grumbled, but Rachel had seen the pride in his eyes when he toured the new facilities. Cristina Vega joined the foundation's board, using her business connections to expand its reach. She and Rachel developed an unlikely friendship, bonding over the complexity of Marcus Vega's legacy. "He would have been terrible at running this foundation," Cristina said at one board meeting. "He couldn't trust people enough to let them help, but somehow he trusted you, someone he'd never met, to find his treasures and use them wisely. That's the strangest magic of all." 2 years after the initial discovery, Rachel received an invitation to speak at a national conference on poverty and wealth disparity. She almost declined, uncomfortable with public speaking, but Michael convinced her that her story needed to be heard. The conference was in Chicago, a massive hotel ballroom filled with hundreds of nonprofit leaders, policymakers, and philanthropists. Rachel stood backstage, more nervous than she'd been facing any legal challenge. "You've got this," Gene said, squeezing her shoulder. He'd insisted on coming for moral support. "Just tell them what happened. Tell them what you learned." Rachel walked onto the stage to polite applause. She looked out at the sea of faces, these people who dedicated their lives to helping others, and suddenly her nervousness evaporated. These were her people. "2 years ago," she began, "I was living in my car with my daughter. I had $1 to my name. I was facing custody threats from my ex-husband's family. I was sleeping on a rotting casino boat I'd bought at auction, and people were laughing at me. They called me crazy, said I was a terrible mother, told me I'd never amount to anything." She paused, letting the room settle into attention. "They were wrong, not because I found treasure, though I did, not because I got lucky, though luck played a part. They were wrong because they confused circumstances with character. They saw poverty and assumed failure. They saw desperation and assumed incompetence." Rachel's voice strengthened. "I want to tell you what I learned on that boat. Treasure isn't just emeralds in a vault. Treasure is the single mother working 3 jobs to keep her kids fed. It's the father sleeping in his truck so his children can stay with friends. It's every person who refuses to give up when the world tells them they're worthless." The room was completely silent now. Marcus Vega spent his life collecting emeralds because he couldn't hold on to the people he loved. He died alone, surrounded by wealth that couldn't save him. But his final act was to trust that someone would find his collection and use it better than he did. He was right. Rachel looked directly at the audience. The real treasure wasn't in that vault. It was in every person who helped me along the way. Gene, who offered expertise when I had no money to pay him. Michael, who took my case when I couldn't afford his retainer. The community members who saw past my circumstances to my potential. And most of all, my daughter Sophia, who believed in me even when I was struggling to believe in myself. She gripped the podium. We have a crisis in this country. Millions of people are one emergency away from homelessness, one medical bill, one job loss, one divorce from losing everything. But they're not worthless, they're not failures, they're treasures that haven't been discovered yet. The applause started before she finished, building to a standing ovation. Rachel saw tears on many faces, recognition in others. These people understood. They'd seen the same things she had. After the speech, Rachel was approached by dozens of conference attendees, other nonprofit leaders wanting to collaborate, philanthropists offering funding, policymakers asking for her input on housing initiatives. But the conversation that mattered most came from a young woman, maybe 25, who waited until everyone else had left. Ms. Torres, I just wanted to say thank you. Her voice trembled slightly. 6 months ago, I was living in my car with my baby. I contacted your foundation, and you helped me get into transitional housing. Now I have a job, my daughter has childcare, and we have our own apartment. You saved our lives. Rachel hugged her, both of them crying. This was why she'd found those emeralds. Not for herself, but for moments like this. The River Queen became something of a pilgrimage site. People who'd heard Rachel's story would visit, walking the restored decks, seeing the preserved Morse code floor, reading Marcus Vega's story in the small museum section. They'd leave messages in a guest book, sharing their own struggles and hopes. Thank you for showing us that treasure comes in many forms. My family was saved by your foundation. We'll never forget. Sometimes the things others see as worthless are actually priceless. On the 3rd anniversary of buying the boat, Rachel organized a celebration that was part festival, part fundraiser, part family reunion. Hundreds of people attended, many of them families the foundation had helped. The Riverside City Mayor came and the governor sent a representative. National media covered it. But the moment Rachel treasured most came quietly, as the sun set over the river. She stood on the promenade deck with Sophia, now 9 years old and growing into a remarkable young woman. Jean was nearby, talking boats with some of the guests. Christina Vega was laughing with Michael Chen about something. The River Queen rocked gently in the current, fully restored and vibrant with life. "Mom," Sophia said, leaning against the railing, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't bought the boat?" Rachel considered the question. "Sometimes. We would have survived somehow. Maybe in the shelter, maybe staying with friends. But it would have been harder. Do you think Mr. Vega knew you'd find the emeralds?" "I think he hoped someone would. Someone who needed them more than he did." Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching the river. "At school, they teach us about treasures, gold and jewels and things like that. But that's not really what treasure is it?" Rachel pulled her daughter close. "What do you think treasure is?" "It's this." Sophia gestured at the boat, the people, the river, the life they'd built. "It's having people who care about you. It's helping others. It's not giving up even when things are really hard." She looked up at her mother. "You're my treasure, Mom. You always have been." Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, the kind that came from happiness so pure it overflowed. "You're mine too, baby. You always will be." As darkness fell, the River Queen's lights came on, reflecting off the water in shimmering patterns. Music drifted from the main deck where people were dancing, laughter carried on the breeze. The boat that had once been a joke, $1's worth of rotting wood and faded dreams, now stood as proof that transformation was possible. Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here, the humiliation of the auction, the desperate nights on a moldy mattress, the moment she'd found Vega's letter and dared to believe in impossible possibilities, the terror of nearly losing Sophia, the vindication of proving everyone wrong, the responsibility of wealth beyond imagination, the integrity of returning what wasn't rightfully hers. Every step had been necessary. Every challenge had shaped her into someone who could handle what came next. Jean joined her at the railing, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He passed her one, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the river flow past. "You did good, Rachel," he said finally. "Better than good. You took something broken and made it beautiful. That's a rare gift. I had help, a lot of help. True, but you had something else. You had vision. Everyone else saw a sinking boat. You saw a home. Everyone else saw worthless scrap. You saw possibility." Jean sipped his coffee. "That's why Vega's treasures found you. The universe has a way of giving people what they're ready to receive." "You believe that?" "I'm standing on a restored casino boat that houses a foundation helping thousands of families, funded by emeralds hidden in a flooded vault that you found with $1 and a whole lot of courage." "Yeah, I believe it." Michael Chen climbed the stairs to the promenade deck, Christina Vega beside him. They'd been dating for 6 months, another unexpected gift from this strange journey. "Rachel, Christina, and I have been talking," Michael said. "We want to propose something. You know how the foundation operates in 6 cities now?" Rachel nodded. "We want to expand it to 20, maybe more. Create a national network of River Queen centers, each one housed in a restored building with historical significance. Places that were overlooked or abandoned, brought back to life and given new purpose." Christina added, "I have connections to properties across the country. Closed theaters, old hotels, defunct community centers, places with good bones but forgotten stories. We could do what you did here, but everywhere." Rachel's mind raced with the implications. It would be massive, complicated, expensive. It would require partnerships, fundraising, years of work. It would be exhausting and challenging and probably impossible. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Let's do it." They spent the next hour planning, sketching ideas on napkins, discussing logistics. Sophia eventually fell asleep on a bench nearby, worn out from the day's excitement. Rachel covered her with a jacket and returned to the conversation. As midnight approached and the last guest departed, Rachel did one final walk through the River Queen. She checked each room, each deck, each carefully restored detail. In the small museum section, she stopped at the display showing Vega's original documents and the emerald story. Someone had added a new note to the guestbook that afternoon. Rachel read it by the soft light of the display case. "I came here homeless and hopeless. The foundation gave me a place to stay while I got back on my feet. Now I have a job. My kids are in school and we have an apartment. Thank you for seeing treasure in people like me. You saved my life." Rachel closed the book gently and turned off the lights. She found Sophia still sleeping on the promenade deck, Jean sitting nearby keeping watch. "Ready to head home?" he asked quietly. Rachel looked one more time at the river, the stars reflecting on its surface like scattered diamonds. "Yeah, let's go home." She carried Sophia to the car, the girl mumbling sleepily but not waking. As they drove away from the River Queen, Rachel glanced in the rearview mirror. The boat's lights were still on, a beacon on the dark river, welcoming anyone who needed help. 3 years ago, she'd placed $1 on an auction table, while wealthy people laughed. She'd been at the absolute bottom, with nothing but a child to protect and a determination not to break. Now she was building something that would outlast her lifetime, that would help thousands of families. that would prove that worth had nothing to do with wealth until you used that wealth for something worthy. The emeralds had been real, hidden exactly where Marcus Vega's clues had indicated. But they'd never been the real treasure. The real treasure was what Rachel had possessed all along. The courage to take a chance when everyone said she was crazy. The vision to see possibility where others saw ruin. The integrity to do right even when it cost her dearly. The wisdom to understand that being saved and saving others were the same thing. Sophia stirred in the back seat. "Mom, are we home?" Rachel smiled, pulling into their driveway. "Yes, baby, we're home." And as she carried her daughter inside, past the comfortable furniture and warm lights of their modest house, Rachel realized the deepest truth. Home had never been about the boat or the money or the foundation. Home was Sophia's sleepy smile. Home was Jean's gruff loyalty. Home was Michael's steady support. Home was Christina's unexpected friendship. Home was every family they'd helped find their footing. The River Queen had been the catalyst. The dollar had been the key. The emeralds had been the means. But love had been the treasure all along. $366 million in emeralds, hidden in a vault beneath a sunken casino boat, found by a single mother who everyone underestimated, used to build something beautiful from ruins, returned when returning was right, shared when hoarding would have been easier. Marcus Vega had spent his life collecting precious stones to fill the hole left by love lost. In the end, his emeralds had found their way to someone who understood that love was the only treasure worth keeping, and that keeping it meant giving it away. The last light went off in Rachel's house. The street was quiet, the night peaceful, and somewhere on the River Queen rocked gently in the current, ready for tomorrow, when it would open its doors again and offer hope to anyone brave enough to believe that treasure isn't just something you find. Sometimes it's something you become. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.